Hey church, what a delight it is to come to you through this medium, videos. I hope that we will be doing more of this in the coming future. I'm sure that a few of you are wondering what in the HE double hockey sticks is Jimmy doing in the church with a truck hood. Well, I'll tell you, it's our opportunity to have an annual meeting, and that annual meeting is typically a bit of a State of the Union address, a State of the Parish address, and it's an opportunity for us to really look under the hood of St. John's to get a sense of the miles that we traveled over the course of the past year, and maybe make sure that the engine that drives our organization, love being the fuel, the engine being our church, is in good shape for the year ahead. So I'm going to give you a briefish look under the hood of 2022 and maybe just a bit about where we might find ourselves in 2023 as well. So the year last year, 2022, began with what felt to me kind of like a long slog, continuing to move our congregation and our community out of this COVID global pandemic that has been such a stress and strain for so many of us. And the metaphor that comes to mind in my mind is it's a bit more like climbing Gannett Peak than it is climbing the Grand Teton. So many of us who live here have climbed the Grand Teton, and if you have, you know, you sort of jump out of the truck at the trailhead and you're right on the mountain making your way up to the top. But when you climb Gannett, you've got a 20-mile or so hike before you ever make it to the base of the mountain, and then you make your way up to the summit of the tallest mountain in Wyoming, and you make your way down to the foot of the mountain, and you still have this long, slow slog back to the trailhead. And I would say that the very beginning of 2022 kind of felt like that long slog back to the trailhead that, you know, some of us are inspired by, but most of us honestly probably dread. The early focus of our ministry here was, how do we piece together, reconceive, reimagine, resurrect our children, youth, and family ministry? That work began relatively quietly with clergy and staff leaders and with vestry leaders beginning to discern who we might call to come join our congregation to reinvigorate, resurrect, and renew that ministry. And it took us a while, but we landed a wonderful fish with Travis and Gracie and baby Helen, the Helms family. Eventually, as we went through the discernment process and the interview process and bringing Travis and Gracie out, we were blessed to have the Helms family join our parish early in the summertime. Mary had already been doing some fantastic work. Mary, along with other lay leaders, had been doing some fantastic work at bringing our children, youth, and family ministry back to the present consciousness of our parish life. And I'm delighted to say that that work has been wonderful. It's still in process. I would expect it to grow 5 or 10-fold in the coming year. But all of you who have been around this parish know that the gift of the Helms family has done a wonderful job at reinvigorating that youth, that children, youth, and family ministry that we have. As we pushed into the spring during our discernment process and our recruitment process of Travis, We also began the season of Lent with a bit of a comical video. You saw a dance routine put on by the staff launching this theme of better together. Like, how do we really lean into the work after being separated for so long by the trials and tribulations of the global pandemic? How do we renew the relationships that we have and regain the connections that are so important to the mission and ministry of St. John's? So you saw a wacky video and you got a package of peanut butter and jelly, and hopefully you had an opportunity to come together around a table with folks you knew and folks you have come to know over the last year, strengthening the relationships that exist, but also forming better and stronger relationships within the context of our community and welcoming new people into that collection, that puzzle of relationships that makes up St. John's Episcopal Church. Our Lenten process was interrupted by a pretty big catastrophe that I know was in the front part of so many of your minds. I got a text from Brian one morning saying, "Hey, Tim just walked into the building and the fire suppression system is leaking water all over our building." The failure of our fire suppression system caused an enormous amount of damage to the southern wing of our main church building. Brian, Tim, Robin, vestry leaders, lay leaders came together to see how we could quickly, lovingly, soundly repair our church building so it was ready for the mission and ministry that we had planned in the summer, and was also equipped for the present future of the ministry that we might engage in here in this church. While we suffered an enormous amount of destruction through that flood, we also turned that crisis into an opportunity and were able to make some adjustments to the building that make space a bit more flexible for us so that we can accommodate more groups and more mission and ministry here in the St. John's building. All the while that was happening, Mary was working hard at building and strengthening our women's ministry. The sort of summit of that experience was a retreat that a number of women took to Cody, Wyoming, to our own Episcopal Retreat Center, Thomas the Apostle Center in Cody, spending the weekend looking at theological language for God, coming together in worship and fellowship under the banner of the arts and the building of relationship one to another. Prior to that retreat experience, women leadership came together in our parish, began building opportunities for women to come together around a lunch table on Thursday midday, and also deeper into late summer and early fall, and a monthly experience for women to come together in worship and around a meal on Tuesday evenings. Back to the summertime, we launched a new theme, Peace Like a River. And it was wonderful for me to see bars of Dove soap around homes and powder rooms and garage work sinks and laundry room sinks, putting us in the place, reminding us to engage in centering practices that bring peace to our lives. We settled in on a theme like that, knowing that there was so much anxious chatter in the culture coming out of the experience of COVID that we wanted to provide a little moment of centering, a moment of calm, or even a season of peace across the valley. The high point for me in our Peace Like a River campaign was our Armada of Love, afloat from the dam of Jackson Lake all the way down to Pacific Creek, where when we finally made our way down as a group at Pacific Creek, we baptized a number of members in our congregation. Some of those baptisms were planned and we knew that they were happening prior to our organization of that event, and others were spontaneous. Members of our community moved by the experience of coming together on the water and seeking a deeper connection with God and a deeper connection with our church community. It was a wonderful event. You might also remember that in the month of August, we ordained our own Christy Lockery to the Sacred Order of Deacons. Christy's role as a deacon is a bit different than mine as a priest, where my role as a priest is centered around a particular community within the context of the parish, surrounded by the altar that sits to my left. The role of the deacon is a ministry on the outside of the church, seeking to engage those who need the love and care of God outside the confines of the Episcopal Church. It has been a delight to watch the Reverend Dr. Christy Lockery come into her own and begin to fully embody that ministry as a deacon. You might also remember that toward the end of the summer, leadership, vestry, and staff leadership organized with the help of a consultant, Glendon Smith and James Clote and Associates, we began to conduct a feasibility study about whether or not to engage in a capital campaign with the eye of rebuilding our Browsenby building. This is not a new idea. This idea of rebuilding the Browse building existed long before I arrived here in the summer of 2016. And so many different parts of our parish has given us insight and direction into what that process looked like. Over the course of the summertime, we hosted many opportunities for folks in our parish to come and learn about the potential plan that we had in the rebuild, in the idea of rebuilding our Browsenby building. Eventually, we've gotten to the place of having a plan to expand the Browsenby space, to give specific, dedicated, well-designed space to the Jackson Cupboard, feeding the hungry in our valley. Also, ample, accessible space to the recovery community, offering them more than one room in case they would want to run concurrent meetings, adding elevators to a new building that make all the space, but particularly that recovery space, accessible. And of course, a part of the plan, which is nearly a part of every new building that's built in Jackson, are 2 units of housing. Now, we all know that we need far more than 2 units of housing when it comes to the housing stock that we need to continue to operate St. John's Episcopal Church through the present future. But 2 additional units of housing within the context of this building are a wonderful start. The feasibility study was a successful one. We received the thumbs up from leadership to continue in the process, to engage in the first beat of planning and organizing a capital campaign. Over the course of the summer, the early fall, we also celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the Red Door series. I think it was Brian who told me the other day that we had celebrated 4,200 collective minutes of meditation around poetry and verse over the course of the last year. A wonderful way that we're softening our hearts and expanding our creativity through the tool of poetry within the context of our church buildings and our church community in order to deepen spiritual practice connection to God, and connection one to another. You also knew, if you were around our campus, that we were a bit torn up in the late summer and early fall. That was the result of adjacent development across Glenwood here. We've known for some time that our sewer line connecting the Coombs Outdoors building would need to be reestablished when it was time to demolish the buildings in preparation for phase 2 of the Glenwood project. We worked in concert with the developer across the street, Bear, also with Fish Creek Excavation, to reconnect the sewer line. It was a wonderful gift to receive approximately 50% of the financial support coming from Bear Construction, alongside the generous resource that St. John's has. I can say that sewer is reconnected. All of our sewer lines now exist on our own property, and we are sort of masters of our own kingdom here. So it's something that we knew that was coming up. We had to endure a little bit more construction dust after a long spring and early summer and putting our buildings together, but that was done successfully and wonderfully. As fall began to turn to winter, we welcomed the season of Advent. We welcomed that season under the banner of an extra hour of love, an absurd demand to make on people during the busy holiday season. We want one more of your hours, one more hour of love in a time when we tend to be frenetic and stressed out. But what we came to find about our congregation is that rather than spending an extra hour of love, we had this growing consciousness of just how much love our collective community of individual parishioners pushes out into our beloved community of Jackson Hole and well beyond. It was remarkable to watch a growing consciousness of all the good work that you do so lovingly, so diligently, and so faithfully spread out across the community during the holiday time. And finally, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to each of you. When we moved in to the month of December and we began to look more carefully and strategically at the finances of St. John's Episcopal Church, we were aware that as a result of our sewer reconnection project and the subsequent destruction of our building and replacement of our fire suppression system, that we were further behind on our budget goals than we wanted. I wrote a letter. I sent you a letter in the mail with an envelope. Many nonprofit organizations do that at the end of the year. At the announcement period during the 8 o'clock and the 10 o'clock service, I brought up our need gently, simply saying, we have a need for a little extra support, and if you are able to give it, we will greatly receive it. It came as no surprise to me that the response to the letter and your response to our need was nearly immediate and outrageously generous. I can look you in the eye and tell you that we have finished the year in a very strong position. We didn't have to say no to anyone who asked for our help or our assistance. And it puts us in a place where we're able to prudently and cautiously be good stewards of this building in the coming years, and also in a wonderful place to continue to expand the mission and ministry of St. John's Episcopal Church. I want you to know that leading this congregation is one of the greatest privileges of my life. Coming together, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, hand to hand with each of you is such a wonderful gift. And watching the love that you expend out into our community and to wild places like the Dominican Republic, West Africa, soon to Nicaragua, to the island of Cuba, is so inspiring. Thank you, St. John's Episcopal Church. Thank you for being the loving community that you are. Let's keep up the good work, and let's continue to spread more love and make even a bigger difference in our beloved community and well beyond.